All right, now here we are in Adobe Illustrator, and we're going to start working on the emblems. Now, for most cars, most brands of cars, they're going to have custom fonts for their emblems. They probably have a designer on staff that just makes their font for them, right? So chances are you're not going to be able to find the same exact font for your car emblem that manufacturer uses. Now, if you're lazy, if you're or if you just don't feel like doing what I'm about to do here, you can just use any font, right? You can use something similar. It's not going to break the realism or break the immersiveness if you just decide to use something that's similar but a little bit different, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And that's honestly probably what I'm going to do for the runabout emblem. I'm probably just going to find a font that works. But I've already looked through Adobe fonts, and I've looked for something like the Pinto, and I've looked for something like for the Ford, and I just can't really find anything that's close enough. And I'm finding fonts that are really close to the Ford emblem, but the Ford emblem is kind of squashed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it from scratch. Specifically for the Pinto and for the Ford emblems, I'm just going to make them from scratch. So I'll walk you through how to do that. Now, for the horse here and the little tail here, we're going to do something unique. For the tail, it's not going to be super unique, but for the horse, I will probably end up taking that into either Mudbox or ZBrush, I'm not sure yet, and doing some sculpting. So we will include that in the video, so you will see that being included in the videos. But what I'd like to do is just sort of walk you through, at least partly, me doing this Pinto, recreating the font for this Pinto emblem from scratch, and then I'll just do a time lapse of me doing the Ford, because I'm basically going to be using simpler techniques, or the same or simpler techniques for the Ford emblem. The Pinto one's a little bit unique in that it's italicized. So there's going to be some unique things that we need to do there. So that's what I'm going to do first, is I'm just going to walk you through how I'm going to do the Pinto emblem. And then I'll just do a time lapse of doing the Ford emblem, and then we'll talk about how to do the horse and this tail, and eventually we'll bring them all into Maya and make them 3D. So to start, I have these three images here in a layer, layer one here, and I just basically copied and pasted these from Google Chrome. So just a Google image search, and then I just copy and pasted them in here. And what I want to do is make these a template layer. So up here, you can double click your layer, and you can choose to make this a template layer. So I'm going to do that, but first what I want to do is go to the main opacity of this main layer, and I want to drop the opacity on this entire layer down like 50%. And let me first just explain why I'm doing this, because I think that's important, right? Ideally, I want to be able to draw shapes under these images. So if I make a new layer and I draw shapes on top of these images, I'm not going to be able to see below it. And if I put this layer below, right, and then I make this a template layer, so if I come up here and double click this and make this a template layer and hit OK, it will dim the images, but I still can't see below it, and I want to be able to see below it. So I'm going to double click that, and we'll change this back from not a template layer first. And then I'm going to select this whole layer one. I'm going to drop the opacity on it like 50-ish%. So now we can see the shapes that we're going to be making under it. And now I'm going to make it a template layer, but I want to turn off dim images and just hit OK. Right, so now it's a template layer that I can't accidentally select or move or anything like that. and now we can start making our shapes underneath it. Now, the one thing I want to do first here is I want to get the angles right. So this is italicized. This is going to be a very important thing because I don't want a bunch of different angles, and if I eyeball this, then all of my angles are going to be slightly off. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a cube here, or a cube, or a square, and let's zoom in a little bit to this, and I'm going to angle it, try to get it the perfect angle here, close as possible. And I'm not trying to outline it completely, right? Because a lot of this outer little highlight area, this beveled edge, we'll do that in Maya. So I'm only trying to create sort of like the inside flat part of this letter. And I want to get that as close as possible to the right angle here. So something about like that. And then I'm going to just take this shape here, and I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to line it up with each one of these straight parts here, and we'll resize them a little bit as well, but I just want to get the angle the exact same throughout first. All right, in fact, I think all of these are going to be about the same. The Pinto one's a little bit thicker, so let's just do the first one here, and I'm going to, whoops, don't want to rotate it. I'm going to resize it, something like that. And then I'm going to just duplicate this so we have the same exact angle on all of our letters. And if it's a little bit off, again, it's no big deal. We will fix all of this stuff. And then a lot of these I can just kind of scale down to kind of fit in that spot where I need it. And for now, I'm not really worried about anything else. I just want to get that angle for all these straight parts of the letter right. And again, you guys, for a lot of people who may be Illustrator experts, this may seem like I'm doing this in an unorthodox way. But honestly, this is just the way that my brain works, right? This is the way that I can do what I can with the tools that I have. And eventually you will find your own way to do things. Okay, so once I have that, that's sort of like my base shape for all of this stuff. And then for this P part here, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry yet about any round corners anywhere. I just want to do straight, hard edge shapes all over the place, and then we'll worry about the round corners later. So I could kind of do the same thing here with the P that we did with that to get like a nice straight line. But what I can also do is with my pen tool, if I want to start doing this line here, so I can click once right there. If I hold down Shift, it's gonna adhere to a straight line. So I'm gonna hold down Shift there and just make a little point there, and then I'm gonna move. Let's move all the way down, something like here. Click. And then I'm going to make a straight line all the way up like that. And let's go here. And then we'll do a straight line all the way back like this. And this angle, I'm okay with just kind of eyeballing that, right? And that's all we're trying to get right now, right? And then to get this sort of round P shape, what I can do is grab my curvature tool, and I can try to just pull this corner out. If it doesn't work, we could try something else, but let's just try to get this close. And it looks pretty good here, just not quite right up here. So what I'm going to do is go back to my pen tool. I'm going to select this. Whoops. Actually, let's go to our anchor point tool. And I'm going to drag this out so it's straight. So until we get something like this, and we can just kind of adjust the anchor points a little bit. So we get this shape looking good, right? And again, if it's a little bit off, I'm not too concerned with that. And periodically, we could just kind of turn off this top layer just to kind of see what that looks like. Right, and I think for what I want, that looks fine. If anything, probably what we can do is grab this point right here and just move it back a little. And I'm just using my arrow keys to move this back, holding down Shift. Right, so I'm just going to do the P, show you guys how I go about doing the P, and then we'll do a time lapse of all the other stuff. Maybe I'll do the I too, just so you can see how I go about that. Okay, and then I just want to make this bottom part here, and I think what I want to do is extend this down past, right? Because we should have a this should go all the way down to that corner there. And then I'm going to make another little square, and I'm just going to do a basic square here. Actually, no, we'll use our pen tool to make a little shape like this. Right. And I'm going to grab this point here and just move it back a little bit further. This will make sense why I'm doing this, I promise. And then for this shape here, we can the internal shape here, we can kind of do the same thing. I'm going to do this one with a different color though, just so we can kind of see the difference. So I'm going to do this with just like a pink color. And again, I'm going to go beyond this square that we have here. And again, this may seem weird, just kind of stick with me. I promise it will make sense. Right, so do something like that, and then again with my curvature tool, and then I'm just going to bring this one out and try to get this to be somewhat right, and we'll probably have to tweak this one a little bit. So, oops. Move that one back, pull this forward. All right, so something like that looks pretty good, right? Now this is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4 different shapes. So now I'm going to select all 4 of these shapes, and I'm going to use my Pathfinder tool. So we're going to go to Window, Pathfinder. And then what I'm going to do is a divide. So what a divide will do is basically cut everything up into individual shapes. So I'm going to divide it, and then I'm going to unite it back together after I delete some parts, right? So just kind of bear with me for a moment here. So we're going to do, let me just double check here. I want to bring this up so this goes through all of my shapes. And then let's adjust this one a little bit so it's more in the center. Something like that. Okay, so now I'm going to select all of those shapes and we're going to do a divide, right? And that will, if I look in my layers here, that will basically divide everything up into a bunch of little individual shapes. And that's good, but they're grouped together. So I want to ungroup them. So edit, or is it under File, Edit? Where is group? Ungroup. There it is. Under Object, Ungroup. So I'm going to ungroup it. And then when I ungroup it, I can delete everything that I don't want, right? Like this middle P part, this guy, and this guy, right? So I can delete all that stuff. And now I can select it all again, including this bottom part here and this one, and unite it back together. So now it's one P shape, right? So now we have one nice P shape here. Now let's round some stuff out. Mainly we want to round this one out, and we want to round this one out, and then probably just round all of our corners a tad. So to do that, what we're going to do is use our direct select tool. If I just select one of those points, we get this little dot right here that I can then pull down around that. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. We're just going to select this little dot, pull this up. And then to give the rest of them sort of like a uniform roundness, I'm just going to hold down Shift and select each one of my sharp points. Right? And then all at once, I can give these guys just a little bit of a roundness, not too much, right? Maybe just something like that. Right? And then we have our P that we have created from scratch. We can turn that off to kind of take a look at that. That looks pretty good. So let's continue on, and we're going to do the eye. The eye is a little bit more, it's not necessarily more complicated, it's just different. But we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to just kind of extend this further than I want it to go. And then this one's actually, it's actually, now that I think about it, pretty easy because I can just grab a square and I can make a little square that goes all the way through like this. And I will make a little square that goes all the way through here. And I want to make sure that it goes all the way through. Right, and then like this one here, to make this at an angle, what I'll do is just switch to my direct select tool, and I'm just going to move that straight back like that. And then of course this one's going to be a little bit different, but we could probably also just do this with a square, right? So I'll make a long square and then just kind of rotate it. So see, once you break all this stuff down into its basic shapes, it's not quite as hard as you think it would be in terms of making these things, making these shapes again. I'm kind of worried about this little transition here though. So what I'm going to do is make another little shape that just kind of fills that in. We'll do another little square. Let me make this one a different color just so it's easier to see. And actually, I think what I want it to be is just kind of straight down from here to here, something like that. Or do I want it to be an angle? I think I want it to be an angle. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly. We're not trying to recreate this font exactly. We're just trying to get something pretty close to this. Right, so same thing now. Once I have all these shapes, what I'm going to do is select them all. And then we're going to do a divide. And then we need to go to Object, Ungroup. And then I'm going to select all the pieces that I don't want. Like that. Something like that looks pretty good. And then we're going to select them all and unite them back together. And then I want to round my individual round corners. So this corner is pretty round, right? And then this corner is round. And let's see, we should be able to round this one. And I'm going to round that one. Something like that looks pretty good. And then for the rest of them, again, I just want to give all of the corners just a little bit of roundness. So I'm just going to shift, select these. And just give them all a tiny bit of roundness. So something like that. All right. And then if we hide our image there is our eye. Looks pretty good. Yeah, I would say that looks pretty good. This corner didn't get rounded, so let's go ahead and just select that little guy right there and round that one quite a bit. And then for the dot in the eye, we could probably just do an ellipse, something like this, and just kind of rotate it a little bit. So something like that's probably good for the ellipse. All right, so I'm just going to do a time lapse where I just do the rest of this stuff, and I will also do the Ford, and then we'll jump back in. I may talk about it through the time lapse, but then we'll jump back in and maybe we'll talk about how to bring it into Maya from here and to do some of the bevels and stuff. But eventually we're going to do this guy, and we're probably going to do this in Mudbox. Just because I feel like Mudbox is a little bit more streamlined and it's not as hard of a piece of software to learn as ZBrush. So if you've never used any sculpting software, Mudbox will be a little bit easier to jump into and use. Okay, so here we are in the time lapse. And there's a few things that I do here that I did just want to explain. For some reason, whenever I'm doing work in Illustrator compared to Maya, it seems super slow. So this one's actually sped up 400%. So this is 4 times as fast. What I do here is I turn on my rulers and I pull down a couple guides so I can just get the vertical sort of height right throughout. So that's what I did there. I just went to view, turned on rulers, and then I pulled down a couple guides. And you know, this does require you to know Illustrator a little bit. If you don't have Illustrator, there's any vector app will work, but you do need to take the time to learn how to use the tools. And again, this is just the way that I like to do things. I really like using the Pathfinder and sort of making shapes that way. So you know, that might not be a feature in every vector software. So this may be a case where you just have to kind of do the best with the tools that you have. So this, may not necessarily be something that will work for your situation, just depending on what your situation is, right? For me, I have access to Adobe Illustrator, and I know Adobe Illustrator really well, so that is the software that I use. There's also text features in Maya, right? You can type out text in Maya and pretty much do the same thing. You don't necessarily have to come into Illustrator. You can also just model this stuff from scratch, using Maya's modeling tool. So you don't necessarily need to do things the way that I'm doing here. For me, this is just faster, right? Like going through and Illustrator just has so much better vector tools for doing things like text. This is just a much faster process than modeling it from scratch. So that's why I'm choosing to do it this way. A good alternative to Illustrator, if you don't have Adobe Illustrator, is a program called Affinity Designer. I think the price is probably somewhere around $50 and $100 USD. And it's a one-time thing. So the great thing about Affinity is you pay for it once and you don't have to, it's not like a monthly subscription or anything. But that is a great vector designer. There's also Adobe Fresco, which is free. I'm not sure if it has text functionality, but you can absolutely bring images in and just kind of trace them the way that I'm doing here. So there are other options out there if you don't have access to Adobe Illustrator. But I feel most comfortable in Adobe Illustrator, so that's what I'm doing here. So there is a little feature that I will use here when I get this O kind of the shape that I want it. There is a simplify feature that I will use in order to kind of round it out more than I have it. You'll see that here in a moment. So after I get it to be about where I want it to be, I will select that, go to Path, Simplify, and then you get this little slider that will just simplify or smooth. It's actually not simplify, it's smooth. So we do use a simplify function in the next video when I'm creating the horse, but it's smooth. And I'll do the same thing again here once I get this shape sort of dialed in close to where I want it to be. I will use that smooth function to just make that vector circle really nice and round like that. And again, if it's not perfect, it's not the end of the world. I don't really care too much about that. So here I'm just kind of making a little connection point. There are a couple other connection points that we need to make as well. And we'll probably just do those in Maya. So yeah, and that one's pretty much done. I just need to make the little tail. And this, I'm going to make this kind of thin because it's the way that emblem looks to me. It looks almost like it has a peak, and then it kind of goes down from that peak. So what I was doing there is I was just converting those anchor points to round corners. And again, we're going to sort of extrude out the bevel for this. So it will get wider. So I'm doing that thinnest part there. And there we just kind of connect it together. The Ford one's actually really easy. We can basically build the Ford out of a bunch of squares. And then we just kind of bevel or round off the corners that we want. So yeah, that's basically all I'm doing with the Ford one. So I'm just kind of placing a bunch of rectangles, and then I use the Pathfinder to kind of join them all together. And then we'll just round off the corner. So the Ford emblem actually turned out a lot easier than I expected it. I kind of expected that one to be a little bit more difficult than the Pinto one, but it was actually super easy. So yeah, I just do a divide, I delete what I don't want, and then unite them back together. And then I just select corners and kind of round them off. Now, some of these corners don't want to round by default, so I need to go in and use my pen tool. And I just kind of go in and delete edges or anchor points that are just on flat areas that I don't really need. So there I'm just looking at it really close up to just make sure I don't have any anchor points selected or any anchor points, stray anchor points. That one at the bottom left corner of that little piece right there is particularly being difficult, but I think it's just because I have two anchor points really close to each other right there. So what I ended up doing is just deleting one and then editing the Bezier handle there, so it kind of goes back to that curve, and then it will curve nicely. The O is super easy, right? I just round the corners of that. I make another cube, round the corners of that one, and I do a subtract Pathfinder function. Pathfinder is basically Illustrator's booleans, right? And I kind of do the same thing with this one. I just start out with that. And then I do a divide, delete all those extra parts, unite it back together. I realize I forgot to delete a section right there. So I go back and unite, and then I just round out everything. So yeah, this one was actually super easy to do. You know, at the end of the day, a lot of times when I approach these things, I'm doing text, like 3D text of some sort. The laziness in me says, oh, you can just find a font that will be close, right? You can find one on Adobe or whatever that will be close. I feel like I spend more time flipping through fonts than it would take for me to just create it from scratch. So my attitude moving forward with this kind of stuff is just to kind of create it from scratch from the beginning. And you'll kind of see that here. I decided just to find a font for the runabout, and I flip through them and I flip through them and I flip through them, trying to find one that works, one that I like well. And then I eventually go to find more fonts. So I go to all of Adobe's fonts, and I start looking through all of Adobe fonts. So you'll see that how just time consuming this is, right? I'm spending 20 minutes just flipping through different fonts, trying to find the right font to use. So at the end of the day, you're going to probably get better results and more accurate to the text that you're trying to mimic if you just kind of recreate it, right? Just create it from scratch. You're probably going to get better results. In some situations, you can find something that's really close. Like I eventually find something here that's pretty close. And I just go with that. But if it's just a few letters and those letters are unique, just create them from scratch. It's going to be quicker, believe it or not, than flipping through and looking through a font. I mean, you can just see how much time I'm spending looking for a font, right? It's very time consuming. And like the Pinto that I have and the Ford emblem that I have, I think those look great. So yeah, usually it's going to be more efficient if you just find something or just make something from scratch. All right, now we have all of our vector emblems here, except for the little horse, which we'll deal with in another video. Now let's take these into Maya, and we'll talk about making them 3D, right? So I'm going to start with the Ford one here, and I want to go ahead and just grab all of these together, and I'm just going to copy them. So Control C, And then we're going to come into Maya. And this is just a blank scene in Maya. I prefer to do this in a separate scene by itself. So this is just a blank scene here. And I'm going to use our SVG tool. Now I'm in my mega shelf here, but you should be able to find this in your polygon modeling, SVG. So we'll just do that. And then because we copied it from Illustrator or whatever vector app that you're using, we can just come over here and hit paste, and that will paste that whole icon or the whole vector into this. Now there's lots of different settings here that we can use for this. I've kind of figured out a way to forego using all of these settings because they're just kind of like, I don't know, in my opinion, a lot of these settings, because you do have bevel settings and stuff like that, a lot of these settings are just kind of more trouble than they're worth. So all I want to do here is I want to get my main shape here, and I want to retopologize it so it's got some nice geometry inside, and then we can use that to build out the rest of our shape. So the first thing I want to do here is just increase my curve resolution a little bit to get a little bit smoother curves. So maybe something like 7. I think that's pretty good. And then I'm going to basically delete the history. I'm going to destroy what I have here. So I'm going to delete the history on this. And so now it's no longer a SVG mesh, even though it still has the SVG name, but it's no longer an SVG mesh that I can move around. Now you'll notice also that it's black, and if I assign like the default material to it, so if I assign like the standard surface to it, it is still black. That's because when it comes over from Illustrator or whatever vector program that you're using, it's got vertex color. So what we need to do is unlock or unassign the vertex color. So to do that, what we're going to do is go to Mesh Display, and we're going to go to, where is it at here? Give me a second here to to remember where this setting is. Paint vertex color tool. I think it may be apply color. And what I want to do is just subtract or remove color and hit apply. And that will remove all the vertex color. So now we see our default material here. And what I want to do next is retopologize this thing. So I'm going to, with it selected, I'm going to go to Mesh, Retopologize, and look at the settings. And I want to kind of look at the amount of tries that we have here on this. And if you want to bring this up, it's under Windows, Display, Heads-Up Display, Poly Count. And this will show us how many tries we have in our scene. So we currently have about 500 faces, 2,000 tries. So I'm going to let me reset the settings here first. And I'm going to set my target face count for this to 2,000 just to see what we get. We can adjust it later. And I want to make sure that I have Preserve Hard Edges turned on. And then I'm going to just retopologize. So we're going to get a little error window that pops up, and I'm just going to hit Ignore and Continue and give that a second and see what we get. So it actually didn't give us what we wanted, right? So let me do a couple more things here. I'm going to undo that. And what I want to do is I'm going to delete everything here except for the face. So I'm going to go in from like my side view here and just delete. So now we have just the face here. And it's probably going to work out a little bit better if we do these one at a time as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Mesh Separate, Edit Mesh, Mesh Separate. Right, so now these are all individual objects. And then I'm going to delete the history on everything, freeze transforms, and we'll go ahead and center pivot. And now I'm going to try to just retopologize one of these at a time. And we're going to do, let's do to around 500 tries per face. That might be too much, but again, we can try to adjust that later. So now let's try mesh retopologize. Let's set our target face count to 500. And I'm going to keep this hard edges turned on. And then we'll hit retopologize, ignore and continue. And hopefully we'll get something. There we go. Right, so it's not perfect, but it is pretty close. Now, one other little thing that we can try here, because it did kind of round out our edges in a weird way. So let me undo that. And I think 500 is a little bit too much. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extrude out like that. And this way we'll see if we can get it to preserve those corners, all of our corners there. So let's try it one more time. Let's go ahead and delete our history on it. Mesh retopologize, and I should just be able to use the same settings to see if it works. And yeah, I mean, overall that worked pretty well. There's a little bit of weird stuff going on over here, but I'm not too concerned about that. I think we can fix that pretty well. And we can probably do a lot less geometry. So we should be able to, without rerunning the process, we should be able to come up here to target face count, and we can, let's go to 250. So we'll cut that in half. And I could even clean this up even a little bit more if I wanted to. We could turn up face uniformity. So let's turn that to something like 0.5. And we'll turn up topology regularity to 1. Let's do face uniformity to 1 as well. And let's continue to drop this a little bit to, let's try 200. You can see that we lost a corner there, so 200 is probably a little bit low. And so you can basically just sort of edit these settings until your heart's content, right? But our main goal is here to just get like some decent interior topology. Let's actually try just lowering it to something like 100 to see what we get. It's weird because I set this to 100, but it's like 2,000 faces. Let's try 200, 250. So it seems to be like going down as I increase the target face count. Let's do 500. Let's do 300. I'm just trying to find a sweet spot for us here. And I can always come in and reduce this a little bit later. It's no big deal if I want to reduce it a little bit. But this is our basic goal here, is just to get something nice. And I could, of course, always do this manually as well. Put these back to 0.5, 0.5. And I'm going to set my anisotropy to 0. And just, keep at it until you get something that you like. We're down to about 1,800, and it could probably go a little bit lower. Let's try increasing our tolerance to like 50%. That didn't really seem to do much. Yeah, so I think I'm just going to go with this, and maybe we'll try to clean this up a little bit as well. I think if let's back up a little bit. Actually, let's just start over. The reason why is I want to change my precision a little bit. I think I had too many bevels in the corner there, so we should be able to just create another SVG, paste that same one in there. I think 4 is a little bit high for curve resolution, maybe, or I had it at 7, which I think was a little bit too high. Let's do 5. You know, honestly, 4 might even be fine, because this will round out whenever we do a smooth, so I'm not super worried about that. We could try playing with some of these other settings here. We don't want to delete our caps. We want to keep our caps. And we could turn off output vertex colors. There we go. That's easier than unchecking. Okay. So this gives a little bit more simple geometry to use. So let's try this. Same thing. Let's delete our history, freeze our transforms, all that good stuff. And then I'm going to come in and just delete all of this stuff. And let's go ahead and we'll see if we can do them all at once. I'm going to select all of these edges. We're going to extrude in a little bit. Let's reverse the normals. All right, so we got something like that. And now let's try retopologize. So mesh, retopologize. We definitely need more than 500. Let's shoot for 1,000 for all of these. Preserve hard edges. Let's see if we can get this to work. We'll delete our history, all that good stuff. Retopologize. It's going to take longer, right? The more we go. But overall, you know, this isn't too bad. It could be better, but in a pinch, I think this is fine for what we want. And then what I'm going to do is, if I look at my reference here, it's basically just got kind of a bevel out. So I'm going to, once again, I'm going to delete all of these faces here. Whoops. Not what I want to do. Not quite sure why it's selecting everything there. Let me delete the history on it. Oh, that's why. We're actually looking at it in the wrong orientation, I think. So, okay, let's do this. And then I'm going to select all of the outer edges here. So that means inner and outer edges for my O and R and D. And we're going to do an extrude. And I'm going to start just by extruding straight out. So we'll do extrude. And I'm going to start with offset, and I'm going to extrude straight out a little bit. And I'm doing this for a reason, because we want to round it a little bit. So I'm going to extrude straight out like that. And then we're going to hit extrude again. And with this one, we're going to go back with some thickness. And then some offset Right now, you got to be very careful about your corners. This can mess up in your corners, like right there. So I will want to go in and fix those a little bit if I'm not careful. But generally, I want to try and get it to where just so the corners aren't really getting in the way of other corners, right? So maybe something like that is pretty good. And then I'm going to select this outer edge here, and I'm going to bevel this whole outer edge. See, there's a couple areas like right there that we may need to fix. So, but this outer edge, I'm going to bevel it, and I'm going to give it maybe 1 fraction, and we'll do kind of a thicker bevel so it has a little bit of a roundness to it. So something like that. Right, and that's sort of like the look that we're going for here. And if there is an area right here where those are kind of going through each other, right? So let's get in close here and kind of take a look at what we have going on. There's something weird right there. We need to fix as well. So like these two, I'm just going to take my target weld function and just kind of weld those up. And you do just want to kind of look through the rest of your model, doing each letter at a time, and just kind of check to see if you have any other little issues like that. But really, that's all we're sort of aiming for here is something like this, and then we can hit it with a smooth our normals, and that's sort of like for the Ford logo. I think that's sort of like the look that we're looking for there. So one at a time, we need to round these other corners. So I'm going to do that for each one of these. Let's see if we can do it to both of these at the same time with our bevel. And I just did 3 segments or 2 segments and then kind of a larger fraction. And that one, once we smooth it, it's going to look really nice and smooth. So the O is easy. The R had a weird issue with one vert going way over there. Let's check that out, see if we can fix that. So it's probably just going to be a case of, again, target welding. So let me just move it closer. To the affected area. And there's also a little vert right there that's kind of, no, I don't want to move that one. Let's see, what is this one? Right in there. So we'll just kind of manipulate that around a little bit. And I think I'm going to take all 4 of these and just weld them up to this point. So we're going to go to target weld, and I'm just going to weld all 4 of these up to that little point right there. Let me go. I'm going to weld these 2 together. And then I will weld these. Right, so you're probably going to have a situation with a lot of your lettering where you're going to need to go in and fix little tiny issues with things like that. Okay, so we fix those. Let's do a bevel, 2 segments, and we'll make it nice and round. All right, check out what that looks like. So our D has some weird geometry right there that we need to fix as well. So usually the way that I will first start to figure out sort of how I want to go about fixing this is just taking those affected points and moving them around, right? But I'm just moving them in 2 axes here because you probably want to kind of move them back into their position. And then, there's always going to be other little areas like right in here that may be problematic. Well, we could try to fix those later. Let's see, or do I want to try to go ahead and fix these? Let's actually take, what I'm going to do is take some of these edges that kind of curl around here in this ugly way, and I'm going to mainly these three right here, four maybe. Let's leave this one and we'll get rid of this one. But I'm just going to deselect them from here. I'm just deselecting everything that I don't want to affect. Okay, and then I'm just going to control delete these. And I probably want to control delete that one too. And then I'm just going to go to my multi-cut tool and just kind of triangle. This part of the model's flat, so I'm not super concerned about it looking weird. It's just a flat area. So yeah, I'm not too concerned about it looking weird. In fact, one really easy way to just go in and fix this now is just to select it and do a mesh cleanup. So mesh cleanup. Let's make sure we got the right settings here. So mesh cleanup options, reset settings, and we're going to do faces with more than 4 sides, lamina, non-manifold, and select matching polygons cleanup. And for some reason it's selecting all of them. So probably what we want to do next is separate. So edit mesh, mesh separate. That way we can just kind of look at the R by itself. Or was it the D that we're working on? We're working on the D, yeah. So now I can delete the history on this one and do a mesh cleanup. And still selects the whole thing for some reason. There's some issues in here. So you're almost always going to have areas with issues like this, right? And in this situation, I think we can probably get away with just kind of moving them around. Like that. Let's see if we can go ahead and just grab these outer rings and bevel them. I could even try another retopology on this too. But let's just try to bevel it first. Right. I mean, it looks good smooth. We really don't need to dive too much deeper in it, as long as it looks good smooth. Yeah, there are ingons in it. Let's see if we can get it to select just the ingons. Yeah, for some reason it's selecting them all. That's okay. I think this is fine for what we want. Worst case scenario, what I was going to say is these ingons, we can just select it and do mesh triangulate. And that will fix any possible ingons that we have anywhere. All right, so we got one right there. We can just triangulate that. All right, and then let's go ahead and just combine these back together, mesh combine. And I'm going to go ahead and save this scene as. Let me set my project first. It looks like my project's already set, which is good. So we're just going to set this to Emblems. And there's my Ford emblem. And if I do a smooth preview on that, it's going to look nice and round. There's areas where it's got a little bit too much geometry, but you know, I could spend a couple hours cleaning that up. But for, you know, something that's already looks fine, I don't think it's a huge deal. Ideally, I would clean that up and make it nice, but honestly, for a portfolio piece or a render or something like this, I think it's fine for this. Okay, so I'm going to name this object Ford, and we can get rid of that SVG mesh, and I'm just going to hide it, Control H to hide it, and now we'll do the next one. So now we'll do the runabout one is going to be, let's do runabout, because I think we're going to do something kind of unique here with this one in order to get it to sort of combine all together like this. Let's do the runabout one in this video, and then in the next video we'll kind of just talk about, this one has some unique bevels to it and the horse. So in the next video we'll cover like the entire Pinto emblem, but let's do the runabout one. So same thing, I'm just going to select my text here and copy it, Control C, and then we'll jump over into Maya, and we're going to do a SVG and just paste that. Paste that. Nope. Did not want to paste. I probably need to make this a vector. So I'm going to go to type, create outlines, and then we'll Control C to copy that, jump into Maya, paste it. There we go. And then turn off output vertex colors. And let's keep this one at a curve resolution of 4. We're going to see if we can get it to work with that. And so same thing again, I'm just going to delete the history on this whole thing. And then we're going to just delete the faces. And we're going to try to retopologize this. So let's, you know what, let's try just retopologizing without extruding, because this is a pretty simple font. There's not a lot of curves in it, and it's a lot of really hard angles. So let's see if we can just delete our history on this, and let's just try to retopologize it as it is. So we'll go to Mesh, Retopologize, and we'll do, let's see, yeah, we'll do 1,000, see how it looks with 1,000, and just hit Retopologize, see what we get. Not bad. You know what? I think that's pretty good for what we need. I don't think we need to go any further than that. So the next thing I want to do is extrude it, right? So I'm going to select all of my outer edges. So I want them to extrude equally. Interior and exterior edges. Okay, and then we got the T. And we're going to go to extrude. And I'm going to give it thickness and offset, or yeah, offset. And I want to offset it to the point where it's sort of going through itself, if that makes sense. Right? So I want this all to be one big object, so I do want it to be sort of going through itself like that. We're looking at the wrong reference here. right? Yeah, so maybe something like that. I could always just bring them closer together as well, but I think something like that's pretty good. And yeah, I'll be honest, this is going to be kind of experimental here. So let's do this. So I'm going to do something like this, and then I'm just going to kind of separate them and push them closer together. So let's go to mesh separate. And like the NA and B is good, but I want to push these other ones just a little bit closer together. So they're kind of going through each other a little bit. And again, like I said, this is a little experimental what I'm doing here. Not sure how well it's going to work, but we're going to find out. Okay, so something like that. And now what I'm going to do is Boolean unite all of these together. So let's delete our history, freeze our transforms, all that good stuff. And we're going to Boolean, mesh Boolean, unite all of them together. Right, so now they're all Boolean together. And then I'm going to try to retopologize them again. So we're going to go to mesh, retopologize. Currently, they're at about 3,000 faces. So we'll stick to that. So I'm going to go to mesh Boolean, mesh retopologize, and we're going to do 3,000 face count, and make sure we keep preserve hard edges on. Very important. Retopologize, and let's see what we get. And let's see. We may need to delete the history on it first before we retopologize. Let's delete the history. I mean, ideally, you could just leave it like this, right? It's not imperative that these things actually be connected to each other. So you could ideally just leave it exactly like this, and it'll be fine. But we're going to try retopologize one more time. And we're pretty much getting the same result here. There's a little bit of weird stuff in here, but just as an example of how you can just kind of leave it the way it is, we're just going to leave it the way it is. And if we do smooth it, it's going to look a bit weird. So we do need to crease our edges. So I'm going to select all of my outer edges and do a bevel on them. Or actually, what we should be able to do is maybe an edge loop all the way around. You know what? I'm going to back up, and we're not going to do a Boolean function. So I'm going to back all the way up, and we're just going to kind of leave them the way they are. We don't need to make them all join together. I was just trying to show you guys how you could do it that way if you wanted to, but we are not going to do that. So let me see if I can back up. I'm going to back all the way up to before the extrusion. Yeah, so back all the way up to here. And we're just going to extrude. Something like this. And then I do want to separate them and move them in so they're kind of connected. So mesh separate. And yeah, I just kind of want to move everything in so it's kind of touching. There's even, there's even a material that I can show you guys how to use, and I might do that, where we can make it look like these are all one piece. Would actually be a good opportunity for that. So we can make all these look like they're combined together without actually being combined together using a certain material node. It's called round corners. So I think we're just going to do that. So the last thing I want to do is just bevel all of my corners, or just add an edge loop. So we could probably just get away with adding an edge loop, but I'm going to, so what I want to do is I want to bevel these all equally. So to do that, we need to combine them back together. I'm going to select them all once again, and we'll do a mesh combine. And then I'm going to select all of the corners that I want to get a hard bevel on. Right, including these guys, right? Including the hard corners. In fact, this might be a good opportunity to use a little script that I made. So I made a script using ChatGPT here where it selects hard edges, or it selects creased edges. So with this little script that I made, and I just went to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you make me a script that will select edges within a range of like, give me a range. So I can say, let me select any edge between, say, 50 degrees and 120 degrees, right? Select edges by angle. And now it's just going to select all of those hard edges for me, right? And then I can close that, and then I can just bevel all of those edges. Right, I can even give them a fraction of 1. So now when I smooth those, I'm gonna have like a nice sharp corner on all of those. So yeah, overall, I think that turned out okay. Let me go ahead and save that. And I'm gonna name this one Runabout. And delete that. H. Let's unhide Ford, which ended up all the way over here for some reason. I'm not quite sure what we did to our Ford icon. So I may have to remake that, but I'll do that off camera. I think I probably just selected it by accident and did something weird to it. There we go. We got it back. I think deleting that mesh right there did something. Let's go ahead and delete our history, freeze our transforms, all that. So there's my Runabout emblem. There's my Ford emblem. And in the next video, we'll talk about the Pinto emblem.